I'd like to welcome Marc Dubois, head of MSF UK, to the show, and apologise. I asked Tony to play a 3-minute video, and it overran. But thanks for that, Tony. Marc, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Richard. Always better to follow a promo video than Richard Dawkins, so maybe it's better this way.
Very modest of you. How have you been? You were on the show last year. I recall that during the course of your appearance, you mentioned that you were writing a book. How's that coming along?
Very slowly writing a book. Trying to just keep together some of the things I'm doing around AIDS. The whole AIDS system seems to be changing rather rapidly around us. And kind of trying to keep my eye on that. But actually, there's almost no time to write a book on the side of MSF's work. So I wouldn't want anyone who donates to think that they're just paying me to sit in a hammock write a book.
Let's start at the beginning before we go on to how aid is changing. For those who may not know the work that MSF, Doctors Without Borders, does, give us a short form answer to that question. What do you do?
Yeah, I guess short form is we respond to people in crisis, not people in need, not people who are just hungry, but people who are starving, people where life itself is really in a very precarious state. So, conflict, epidemic, outbreak, and then natural disaster. So we really look for, medical emergency intervention where it can do the most. Where it can do the most is where people are in crisis. And we're essentially a medical organization. So what we respond with are whether it's a surgical team in Syria or a disease outbreak team, for instance, right now cholera in West Africa, Sierra Leone, and Liberia, or just basic medical care to large refugee populations and displaced populations in the Kivus. That's the kind of stuff we do.
You say it's mainly medical, but you do other things as well. I mean, there's water sanitation. And it's not just doctors. There's a lot of nurses that work for you as well. I think the figure is about 22,000 at any one time in over 66 countries.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And a lot of those, of course, will be international staff, maybe 3,000, maybe quite large staff on the ground. Probably about 50 to 60% of that is medical. But you're right. Health is much larger than surgery and drugs. It involves nutrition and good water and sanitation. So right now in South Sudan, there's been quite a refugee exodus from some of the border areas where the North Sudanese government is bombing. People are fleeing into terrible, terrible areas, swampy areas with no services whatsoever in South Sudan, and there's no water there. And what happens after a short amount of time is you see people with skin diseases, then diarrheal diseases. Now we see hepatitis E. That's what's killing people. So, of course, we have to treat the people with those diseases. But if you don't get them water in the first place, you're fighting a losing battle.
One of the countries that is obviously facing difficulties at the moment is Syria. I saw an interview with one of your workers who had recently come back from Syria. She indicated that the work that was being done there was done secretly. Tell us a bit about that.
Look, we are a neutral, independent, and impartial humanitarian organization, and we would expect any nation to follow the Geneva Conventions, and where there is conflict, to allow us to enter if we present ourselves, and we have been presenting ourselves to the Syrian government, and they will not give us permission to work. So if you don't have permission to work, the sans frontière has to come in, and it's a very, very calculated risk. We have established a secret hospital. It is in an opposition or rebel-controlled area, you probably saw Dr. Rachel Craven, an anesthetist from here in Britain, come back and talk about her experiences there. It's very, very difficult conditions. Very difficult to have just the supply chain, the anesthetics, the blood, the painkillers that you need. And then it's a very, they're operating in a house that they've converted into a hospital, a field hospital of sorts, but they just don't have the space. You can't keep people for weeks in post-operative care to survey them. You need those beds. So it's a very difficult, challenging situation for the teams there.
I'm aware of the time, and I apologise for having you on so shortly, but I know that you wanted to make an appeal for donations because this sort of event is of particular importance to you.
Well, I think every organization out there, every NGO will tell you they need money. But I don't think people quite understand the extent to which, if you want to be an emergency humanitarian organization, that's what we are. That's what we do. We're not a development organization that does some humanitarian work on the side. If you want to respond to emergencies, there's two types of emergencies, two types of organizations. When the emergency hits, you either start doing things for people or you start asking people for money. We need to be the first kind of organization. Secondly, nobody will give you money to go to Central African Republic or Burundi or places based on need. Of course, you understand that the governments of the world give money according to their political strategies, which means you might get a lot of money to work in a place like Afghanistan, but you can't get money for a place like Central African Republic. And then lastly, we won't take governmental money to work in a place like Afghanistan for the very obvious reason that the Taliban might ask us, where'd you get your money? And if you say, oh, the US government and the British government gave the money to us, well, what does that look like? It's belligerent sponsored NGO work. So to be able to respond where people are most in need and to be able to do that immediately to save lives where the crisis is hitting, we need to have this kind of income that is unrestricted that we can then direct to wherever the emergency is greatest. And people think it's a nice thing. No, it's not. It's actually it's vital. It's a sine qua non of how we exist. And without it, we'd just be an organization that has two or three interventions here or there, and then we'd have to start asking governments for money, and that's not what we want to do.
Thunder, if you best bear with me for 2 minutes, just to let everyone know that coming up next will be Zomgits and Thunderfoot. I think I'm going to be hosting it in the same way as we did with Richard Dawkins and Thunderfoot, maybe playing a lesser part. Just one final thing before I let you go, if I may. In the eBay auction, the MSF UK has kindly provided some things for auction, including a number of T-shirts. Am I right in saying that these T-shirts are not available to the public? You can't go to a shop and buy an MSF T-shirt. You have to be in some way involved, or you're going to have to bid on the eBay auction. Is that right?
That's right. In fact, I'm a little surprised to hear that, because we like to, we want to protect that label, that MSF. We want it to be something that, Liberian rebels once kidnapped a bunch. They stole a bunch of those shirts, and they were driving around in them, shooting people. Like 10, 15 years ago. And that's not the kind of thing we want to see.
I'm sorry, it's not funny.
So, yeah, no, it's not. But I kind of trust you, Richard. I doubt you're going to be in the back of a kitted out, 4x4 shooting at people anytime soon, anyway. But we don't just hand those shirts out to the public. They're not promo material. They're the things that we wear in the field to distinguish us from armed actors. It's that simple.
I fear I may have got one of your employees sacked when you go back to work.
I'll just have to have a little chat with them.
Mark, I'm going to let you go because it's past 7 o'clock, and I know that you've got other commitments, and I apologise for only slipping you in for 10 minutes or so, but thank you very much indeed, and have a good evening.
Thank you for what you're doing, and good luck, and to the people out there, I really hope you'll help with this cause.
Thank you very much. I'm going to remove you now. As I say, have a good evening. I'm going to start adding Zomgits and Thunderfoot. As I'm doing that, you could take the opportunity to click on one of those links above the banner. It will open in a separate window. You won't miss anything, I can assure you. It takes about 2 minutes to make a donation. And it will probably take me about that sort of time to get Zomgits and Thunder in. Particularly as I can't find them.